Hi, I'm Rebecca Balcárcel with Writers on Writing. Let's talk with Alberto Rios, poet, author, and educator. Alberto Rios, thank you for being with us today. Um, could you talk about where you get ideas for writing, or how you decide what is worth writing about?
Well, thank you for having me. Let me start off with that, Rebecca. And this is a pleasure. I know I visited your neck of the woods some years ago. I'm happy to make this connection again and not make it seem like just a one-off. Writing doesn't stop, visits don't stop, ideas don't stop. So I'm glad we can continue thinking about something instead of just making it a one-day headline. Right. Well, where
Yes.
do ideas come from? I think that's an excellent question, and if I could answer it, I'd be rich. But I want to say that there is no mystery to the fact that absolutely everything has a story in it. I mean, I'm holding up this glass, for example, and if I just look at the glass twice, suddenly, I've got, a starting point. It doesn't matter where you start, it's where you're going to end up that matters. And so the
Yeah.
prompts, we want to rely on people to give us prompts for writing or look around where you're sitting, where you're standing, just look around. You've got that great color red behind you. Do you know what I mean? And it reminds me just in a moment when I was growing up, my mother, for whatever reason, liked bullfighting, but more than that, and I appreciate this. She liked the art, the posters of bullfighting
Ah, yes.
and the Plaza de Toros and all of that, and that red, right, that you're showing was always the cape and the matador and
Hmm.
so on. So as I'm just looking at that color red, it takes me to something, and
Yes.
I've got to be willing to have the energy to write the next thing. And it's
Ah,
surprising how that just stops us. We run out of energy almost right away. We go like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Oh, but it's so much. Just up. We get in our own way. And so I think the idea of ideas is simple. It's not a problem.
mhm.
It may not think, you may not think that that's what you want to write about, but you don't know till you go the distance.
Mm.
And you can always edit out the beginning. You don't have to have the glass or the wall there. You know what I mean? You don't. I'm guessing that you will have it because that notion of connections is very human,
Yeah.
very satisfying, and often very artful. When you make a connection between something,
Mhm.
something wonderful happens, and it doesn't take long. I work often in a form of in public art. When I do work in public, I often work in a form called a gregueria, which is
Mm.
essentially a one-line poem. And the it comes from a man named Ramon Gomez de la Serna y Puig, turn of the century Spanish writer, turn of last century. I have to be careful to say that. Turn of last century
Okay.
writer. He was writing around the time of the Dadaists, the Surrealists, and
Ah.
so on. And he had this idea of the one line thing that was the crux of Spanish literature, high seriousness and humor in order to create something right for you, the listener. So what happens is, for example, my favorite one that he wrote goes something like this. He said, the old man, the old sailor on his deathbed asked for a mirror that he might look at the sea one last time.
Oh,
Right. And
wow.
at that moment, we go, oh, yeah, I get it. While that man is about to die.
Oh,
That's Spanish literature, right?
oh,
Right, in a nutshell. Humor, I don't mean comedic humor, right? But the humor that comes from connection where we go, aha, I get it. That's a
yeah.
feel good thing. And we maybe don't have a better word than humor for it, but we get the connection. It feels good because we have participated in that moment. And the author has given us a chance to be a participant and not simply shut us out. So much of literature and a lot of poems, they shut us out and they become kind of like a cryptic crossword puzzle or something that we've got to piece together. there's a place for that, and I appreciate some things like that, but in general, I don't think that's how the work ought to happen.
Hmm.
So a Gregeria that I wrote, for example, there's a big lake around Tempe where Arizona State is, and I wrote something like 600 Gregerias around there about water. And some of my favorites are, for example, to visit the river quickly, cut an onion,
Ah,
right?
because you're gonna, yes. Oh,
And
I love that.
it makes a connection. And not only does it make a connection, it's true. We are made of that lake. We're made of water,
Yeah.
right? It gets bigger and bigger the more you think about it.
Oh, like
And
the layers of the onion.
exactly. And I have another one, for example, rain falls down wet and gets up green.
Oh, yeah.
We get it. It's
Fertility
the cycle. Yeah.
and the
So
cycle.
you get the idea of the simplicity and the complexity simultaneously of it. Now, how does that relate to ideas? Well, ideas are a funny thing. Um, we we have a dictionary, for example, and it has all the words in the world, right? It's very efficient, alphabetized and so on. A dictionary is efficient, but a poem is effective, and it only uses a few words. And so you don't need everything in the world to come up with ideas.
Hmm.
You just need one thing.
One
And
thing.
you just need to find the connection and get going, right? Get on
Mm.
the bicycle of where it's headed and don't fall. Just keep on it. And so my idea of ideas is simplicity. I don't need big, complex, ideational things. I do
Hmm.
think we head there, and I do think these little things do that, but you can't start there. You've got to take us there,
Yeah.
right? As a writer. And so
Yeah.
that's what I believe. And so I
Mm.
write a lot about, if you'll notice in a lot of works of mine, they're very mundane openings. They're very straightforward and just observations, but then they build and they build. And that says something to, I'm going to guess you're going to ask me about writing process. One of the
Absolutely.
one of my favorite ways to work is I don't go in with any plan whatsoever.
Wow.
I'm not a journalist. I don't have a story that's already out there to tell. This has got to be an honest, authentic act of discovery.
Hmm.
And so what happens is when I write a line, I just think, what does that line make me think of? What's the next line? And I just go from there, and I let it lead me. And of course I get distracted and I write about whatever, and it takes me to things, but I let it lead me, and I trust the trail that blazes.
Hmm.
It is, just a way to react to my own sensibility. I'm not reacting to somebody else's line. I'm reacting to a line that I just wrote.
Hmm.
Something inside of me said, I want to write that line, and let me. And so something inside of me says, there's more, right? It's just a can opener. It's just the beginning. And I
I
trust
love
that.
that.
I have learned to trust it.
Yeah.
So I let my lines lead me
Hmm.
to whatever is next. And I don't know what that's going to be. And I love that. I love that.
There's
It
discovery for you and then for the reader too.
Yeah, and it also helps me to understand, the old adage, write what you know, of course, but you also write what you know, that you also write, how do I explain this? You also write what you don't know, but that you do know, right? That you didn't know enough to put it in that poem, but by reacting to the line, it just showed up. And now you've got to embrace it and understand, well, how does that fit? Why did I think that? And,
Yeah.
and what are the tendrils of it that now give something to me that's cohesive? And I enjoy that. It's a process. It takes patience. We're in an environment where everything is in a hurry, right? It's like patience is a crime.
It's so
we
true.
we slow, get out of my way. but there's nothing mysterious to the idea that slow makes us pay attention better.
Hmm.
And that better attention makes us think more intelligently or more connectively,
Hmm.
or not just in passing, but in moment. And so often that's the great beauty of a poem, is it's the moment, it's not the story,
Hmm.
it's the moment. Now there may be a story by the end. My students, so often they ask me, Professor Rios, beginning students, where should the best line in a poem be?
Hmm.
The journalists say, well, it's got to be the first line, don't bury the lead, just get rid of. And the science fiction students in the back, they go, no, last line, I awoke as if from a dream, or all these variants. And I say, no, 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 no. Best line in a poem better be the line I'm reading.
Ah,
And
wow.
no excuses, right? I don't, as a reader, I do not have to read the next line. If you give me nothing that sends me forward, or if you require that I go backward, that line by itself has very little integrity and isn't doing something. It's serving the other lines, but it isn't doing what the other lines are doing. And for me, I want every line to have a job, every line. And so, when I see a word like and on a single line, I go, that's a servant line. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It pejoratively. I mean, that's not a good line.
yeah.
We don't want to do that to language.
No.
We don't want to put it into servitude
Hmm.
in that fashion. We wanted to put it into meaningful servitude, that the fact that and was there has meaning and presence, and it mattered. And is the just as an aside, and is the great chicken soup of the English language. It means you're not alone. It means you've got choices. It means this and
Mm,
that. And we feel better. And if you want to write a scary poem, an edgy poem, take the word and out of it. And it's shocking how sharp it becomes, how strident it suddenly becomes. And it changes the complexion of things. So those little words, while and by itself on a line, I get it, I get it, I get it. But what? So what? Where is it doing the work of what it's there to do?
mm.
And it just to go along with and being the chicken soup of the English language, or is the great American word,
Oh,
in that it gives us choice, this or that.
choice.
Most of the world does not own that word. I mean, they have it, but they don't own it. They don't have choice.
Mm,
And that is a great lesson to us as writers. Are we working from choice or from habit? Are we doing it just because we've always done it that way, or are we choosing to do something? And that to me is a huge player in my mindset of how to go forward and think about things.
it's a big responsibility when you
Yeah.
realize I'm going to select, I'm going to choose.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
the,
if you think there's nothing to select, then you must invent, because you always have choice.
yeah. Oh, wow. There's so many wonderful little tidbits in there, but I'm thinking about how you mentioned being, that everyday objects can be a jumping off point, that just being curious about what's around you and knowing that everything has a story can be freeing, that you don't really, you can start anywhere. And then yeah, and you've said
The,
so many
the, the,
wonderful things since then.
but the key in that, when you realize everything has a story, is don't suffer from the exhaustion of knowing that,
Ah,
because it can seem suddenly overwhelming. Well, if everything has a story, it weighs so much. I don't know where to begin. And you're back at the beginning, right?
ah.
So I think the idea just is to catch yourself in a moment. Just stop whatever you're doing, whatever you're looking at. Just stop in a moment and say, not everything, that.
This.
I'm just going to write about that.
Mhm.
And so while everything has a story, that's not what you're writing about,
Right.
right? You
Just,
you focus on it. Yeah.
yeah. And that power of attention and
Yeah.
being willing to trust the process. that it's going to lead somewhere and connections will
And
unfold.
to go along with that, I mean, we have the world out there, and if you are um, complicit in the things of the world, you perhaps speak another language, or you came from another place, or you are a legacy, cultural member of society where your parents came from somewhere else, and so you heard that language, but you speak whatever. You may not
Mhm.
speak it, but you've heard it. All that kind of stuff. Um, I have to say that's, to me, is all completely poetic. And I know that, for example, if I hold this up and I have one word for it, pen, I own it. Man, I'm done. That thing is, forget it, put it away. What is it next? Pencil, doesn't matter. I own it. I don't have to think about it. But if you speak more than one language, I know that a pen is also a pluma. And so I have to stop for a moment and think, who am I speaking to? Or how do I want to say it? And suddenly I can't rush past it. And if a pluma is also a plume,
Mhm.
there are 3 words for it. Maybe there are 10. And if there are 10 words for it, suddenly this thing is wild in my hand. I cannot go past it. I am stopped by it because it's trying to tell me something. What is it? It may not be telling it to me clearly. It may not be giving me a dictionary definition, but what it's saying is, stop with me for a moment. What am I? How am I? Who am I? Right? And so suddenly I can't just say pen and move forward. I have to stop. It's that patience earlier, and why everything has a story.
Mhm.
That's one way to find it if you speak another language. If you just go to a thesaurus and see there are 2 words for anything, it doesn't have to be another language. It may be your own language that has multiple ways to be said. Anything does.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is a gift to us all.
I- it is. That there's a manifoldness to us. What seems like a single thing is actually more, and
Yeah,
could be.
yeah.
And if
And
we
and
stop
and
and give attention.
what's fun too is that if the thing is the thing, then you get to learn that too. If it will not be changed, if it refuse. There was a wonderful Man Ray, who was a surrealist,
Oh,
a painter, object maker, thinker. He did something, turn of the century, with the surrealists. He submitted to I guess it was to an art show probably, an object called the Gift, and it was an iron, a flat iron for clothing. The surface he had glued tacks to. Now suddenly that iron could no longer do. I mean, an iron, even its verb is its noun. An iron is to iron,
two
so that
iron.
clothes will be ironed. That's what an iron does. That's, in some sense, then, and this is dangerous, that's all it does, right?
Yeah.
So identified is it. So the moment he put tacks on the surface, now suddenly we had to think, what else might it be? And in that moment, he was doing what I'm doing with the pen or whatever. He was giving us another language, another way to think of that object, and not just in name, but in function, which I
Yeah.
think is even a step farther. And there's the famous fur teacup, for
Yes.
example. Another, yeah. There are a number of objects that helped us understand that things can be other.
Mhm.
And so, as we look today, it's all around us that things are othering, including people themselves,
Yeah.
right? And I think that all comes together in a very artful sensibility, but artists sometimes need a little help themselves thinking about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow.